All right. Welcome back to the Stronghold Podcast, where we explore capability and truth. I'm your host, Dave Barton. And today we have a first for the podcast. We have a virtual guest. So my guest today is Russ Torgerson. And I hope that's a pretty straightforward one. We're in Minnesota, so we have lots of sons, but it's Torgerson, right?
Correct.
Okay.
No.
Always, it's a rough one when you start off mispronouncing someone's name. So welcome to the Stronghold, Russ.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Honored to be here and honored to be your first virtual/remote guest.
Yeah, I'm glad you are, and I'm glad that when I reached out and asked you to be the first, kind of the guinea pig of the virtual guest, that you said yes. But more importantly, as we go through the story, listeners are going to hear the story of just an amazing individual, someone that I'm really glad to have in my life. And so as always, on that note, I like to do introductions of my guests. And so I kind of try to dig up some fun facts, loosen things up a little bit, and also take off the burden of everyone having to introduce themselves. And remember, kind of, it's like the business meeting, like tell yourself one thing about yourself, one thing you like to do, about your family, and then how many years you've been with the company. By the time you get to the second question, you've already forgot the first. So as an introduction, I'm going to start off by saying these are things that I know, because now we know each other. We met each other in person and spent some fun times together. You are a husband, a father, a warrior, a man of God. You grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and you wanted to be a firefighter growing up.
Nailed it.
I have a question on that. Was the Halloween, like the go-to Halloween costume every year, firefighter then?
That's funny because I don't ever remember wearing a firefighter costume. But at the same time, with my father being on the Boulder, Colorado Fire Department, I just was there constantly. So it was just part of our life.
How fun. Yeah. That's okay. So any memorable Halloween costumes, as long as I got you on the topic?
Oh, cowboy was always near the top.
Cowboy. All right. And you kind of, I later in life, I think that's an apt description, as people will find out here. Chuck Norris was your hero growing up.
Yes, that is true.
If you come with a Chuck Norris, I feel like you got to come up with one of the jokes. And so I looked up a Chuck Norris joke. So the joke is, did you hear when Chuck Norris jumps into a pool, he doesn't get wet? The pool gets Chuck Norris. So
that checks out. That's cool.
Check there. All right. So you did not become a firefighter, but you end up choosing the Coast Guard, and I like the reason why. You chose the Coast Guard because of Miami Vice.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah. I can tell you it was January or February my senior year watching Miami Vice. I had just had a conversation with the fire chief saying you need to grow up, mature, join the military, and then come see me in 4 years. And I'd seen the ocean once when I was 6, and we went to California. And I'm watching that, and they, you're familiar with the show, and they had a Coast Guard fast boat on there. I didn't even know the Coast Guard existed. So that was a catalyst to start doing research, because I thought that looking at that boat and that job in Southern Florida seemed like a really cool thing from a kid landlocked in Colorado to go do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because you predate me by just a little bit. I'm kind of right on your tail. The good thing is I never quite catch up. But we both grew up with Miami Vice. Maybe that's just a sign of how loose parenting I received as a child. Definitely tuned into Miami Vice. I didn't join the Coast Guard out of my experience with Miami Vice. I got wear a T-shirt under like a really oversized like blazer.
Absolutely.
No socks and loafers.
No socks is key.
Yeah. So everybody got a little different out of that show.
Regarding your age comment, I'm happy to wait for you, brother.
Yeah, you wait for me, and that's fine. If you want to start at this stage, I think we're both at the point where we can just pretty much throw out whatever number we want. So, yeah, or just stop counting. I think that's where I'm at. I'm coming up on a big anniversary. I won't ruin that. So, so you end up joining the Coast Guard, and then spent 31 years. And you were in since 1984, so you spent 31 years in as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer first, and then pilot. I just want to say in 1984, Russ, I was 80. So
fair enough.
So for those of you who don't know, I mean, I know Russ, and we're in a group called Forge Ferocity together, which we'll definitely touch on, and we're the elders. But I gotta tease Russ because he's just a little bit more elder than me, but not much. So in the Coast Guard, I also thought something really interesting about that was you number as a rescue swimmer. I don't want to get this wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But as a rescue swimmer, you number each other. So when you pass through the course, you become an official Coast Guard rescue swimmer. You were number 68 out of, ballpark, like right now, probably a little bit over 1,100. So you're number 68.
I think closer to 1,200 now, but you're correct. And yeah, so the program started in 85. I finished in September of 86. So I'm the old school swimmer guys.
Yeah, no, I like that, and so much more to your story, but it is interesting. Actually, and one other, a couple other facts, would like to loop back to maybe on the Coast Guard. I didn't know this. I didn't know that you actually covered for territory. I was thinking Florida and California too, and coastal, and I had heard you worked in like the Bering Sea, but you actually covered Lake Michigan and Lake Superior, which is my neck of the woods. And I've been in Lake Superior. And so if you're in Lake Superior and you did intend to be in Lake Superior and you're prepared for the experience, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Everybody simplifies it and go, they think East Coast, Gulf Coast, and West Coast. But yeah, there is several, both small boat stations, cutters, and 2 aviation units in the Great Lakes.
Yeah, no, that's treacherous. Okay, now we get to the good stuff. So, Russ is also a jiu-jitsu brown belt. I know in October 23, when I first heard you on our friend Greg Anderson's podcast, Endless Endeavor, that's when I first got to know who Russ Torgerson was and what he was all about. And that's when I reached out and I said, well, I want to get to know more about this guy. I love this story. I believe at that time, this is progression. This is a compliment. You were a purple belt and now you're a brown belt. And for those of you who don't know, it's one belt behind the black belt. So that's kind of a big deal.
Correct. Yeah, that I'm trying to think. You're right. I was had been a purple for a while when I was on Greg's podcast, and then brown belt came, let's say May of last year, 2024.
Yeah. No, it's been awesome, kind of following that journey and keeping up on Instagram and your updates with that and how you lead not only in your church and men's ministry but through the gym too. Some more fun stuff. Guns and Geese. We call them repeat offenders. Are you a 2-time or a 3-time?
2-time.
2-time. Okay. So when we met up in August of this last summer in 2024, that was your 2nd time.
Correct.
All right. And then roundabout kind of, I don't know, this is the way I describe myself too. So loosely, probably maybe unpaid intern at men's ministry at your church.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the way. I always say my pastor gets, it's like good cop, bad cop. And as obviously the paid pastor for the church, he has to be on his best behavior. I can just be myself because I'm not getting paid.
Yes. And it's really hard to fire a volunteer. So
Yeah, that's right. You can be uninvited. So far I'm okay. And you are too?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So that was a lot. And this is why that's why I asked you to be on today, because I think your story is very rich and I look forward to getting into it. But anything right off the top that maybe I missed or that you wanted to highlight or pull out from that?
One thing you said, Dave, was, and it really speaks to who you are. When I was on Greg's podcast, after it was over, he said, stand by because people are going to reach out to you. And of course, you don't believe things until they actually happen. And I think you were one of the first to reach out. And there were several at that point. And I've been blessed to meet a few of those in the last 2 years, or no, year and a half that's happened. But I am grateful that you did reach out, because that really started this friendship that we have. And I look forward to seeing where this goes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I was thinking a way to kind of introduce it into the conversation, but actually, Russ, the reason I reached out, and so everybody heard, kind of Russ's backstory and where he was, and what I heard was a man moving forward on a very exciting mission. And I think that you talked. So I'm not going to lie. Like the Coast Guard story and the jiu-jitsu was alluring, is interesting, and it adds to your story. It adds to who you are. But the reason I reached out, Russ, very, very clearly, was you working with men's ministry at your church and kind of working with Kyle Thompson's on, that does Undaunted Life, and introducing that program into your men's ministry at your church. And the idea of the Christian man having a responsibility not to be meek, not to be weak or passive, but the image of a Christian man being strong. And if you rewind to October 23, I was a few years into what that meant for me as a man of God, to really look at not only that I could be strong, but that I had a responsibility as kind of a shepherd of my loved ones, my family, my community, my church, the men's ministry at our church, to be strong and to take care of myself. And so I reached out, Russ, because of, and I actually went back and re-listened to your podcast, and I think it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And everything that we kind of threw out in the introduction was about 2 hours worth. And I think it was maybe the last 10 minutes or so that you touched on the men's ministry. And I'm like, wow, if this guy with this background and this story can be doing the same thing that I'm doing and making an impact, I want to reach out and I want to find out more. And so, yeah, I think we talk all the time, God's timing and God's presence in our lives is divine, and there's always purpose. And so, yeah, it kicked off something good. But
yeah, and we're getting ready. And so I've been doing it 2 sessions a year, spring and fall. And so we're going to do session number 6 this spring. And we call it the Battleplan. And the tagline is provider, protector, and mission ready. And so I've had anywhere from 12 guys to 4 guys. And one thing that we were recently talking about, which I find kind of funny, is a lot of the guys think it's a exercise only class, like a physical fitness class. And while we hit on that, and at the end of each session, we do a couple of body weight workout, very, very minor stuff. And that's keeping guys from joining. And so I need to figure out a way to break through that as well. Because that's the whole mission of the course, right? Is to be better and to be that provider, that protector, and mission ready. And so I'm still, if you have any ideas, I'm wide open. But it's what we see, in our nation and with a lot of men now, they're just unwilling to step out of their comfort zone, even a little bit, for growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I found, the one that I kind of had to learn the hard way, because, if you're serving a higher purpose, if you're serving God within men's ministry, we were actually just talking about this last week at Men's Coffee, is there's the inclination that every man has is to kind of measure the impact or measure how many people you're reaching by literally how many people show up and how many people are by your side, maybe not from the get-go, but, we'd like them to be immediately after. So with Men's Coffee, for instance, that's attendance. And when the numbers get bigger, the man's nature side of me is that, I'm making more of an impact. We've talked about this before. What it really is, and now kind of moving forward with purpose in life, is that I want to create dynamic spaces for the Lord to enter and work on people's hearts. And so nothing about that phrase has a number to it. It doesn't say when it's 15 or more, I'd really like, Lord, for you to work on these people's hearts, and I'll work to get it up to 15. The Lord just said, hey, make the spaces, make the effort. And I think that's what we've talked about, right? Is that it's just consistent effort applied consistently.
Absolutely. When I started, I didn't follow my own advice because I said, hey, if I do this and I reach one guy, it's worth it. But after I had the big class with about a dozen guys, I was like, okay, now we're really on to something. And then the next class was down to like 6. And my initial response is, what have I done wrong? I didn't do anything. It was just timing. And they continue, it kind of like guns and geese. What I also appreciate is I get repeat attenders in my class as well. So they're building on something and they come back for a tune-up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So maybe we unpack this a little bit because I think men's ministry, leadership, introducing something that's kind of new to people that is needed. There's almost like an adoption period, right? So we talked about guys wanting to be or willing to be vulnerable, willing to even understand what. So your program's called Battleplan, and that was via Kyle Thompson of Undaunted Life, right? Kind of lent the framework, and then you kind of filled in with the Russ specifics.
Yeah, and those that are your listeners that are familiar with Kyle, he has the #1 Christian male podcast in the country, and it has had for quite a while. Yeah. And I ran into him when he first started, as far as a listener, and when I would have the idea for a group at the men's church and came up with the title Battleplan, I was writing the curriculum, and I kept writing things that I knew came directly from Kyle's podcast. So he was very gracious. I reached out to him. We had a couple email exchanges back and forth, and I said, hey, is it okay if I use your material? And obviously he was more than willing to allow that and say, yeah, please do. Because the more men you reach, the better we all are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I ask because so a plan, it's called Battleplan, and you even alluded to a little bit the guys that maybe showed up or were thinking, oh, this is a physical thing, but there's more to it. And I think that when you're serving in any capacity and you're trying to introduce something that the intention is to help them level up, to help them be stronger men of God, to serve their marriages, to serve their children, to be better fathers, to be better members of their community. I don't see those programs in abundance. And so I think when you bring men to that, there's like an adoption period. There's almost like what do Russ or what does Dave want from us here? Or what's the attention, or, what's their intentions? And when you are consistent, I think over time people see, oh, Dave just wants to help. Russ just sincerely wants to help because he's been in a position where he needed that and he's paying it forward. And it's also a calling from God. But how do you see it? And you said you see numbers kind of all over the place, but you've also had men come back to the Battleplan program. Is that kind of the way you look at it too, Russ?
Yeah, and again, I think it's pushing out of the comfort zone. And I start off the class day one. Pretty much the first thing I say is if your house is on fire, can you pull your family to safety? And you'd be surprised the looks I get from some of the men. If you're out shopping and there's gunfire, and I don't go to the mall, but if you're at the mall, can you run 100 yards to get to safety with your family? Right. And I think that, and as you're on a jiu-jitsu journey as well, the physical fitness piece and the mobility, no matter what your age, is key. Yep. To pretty much everything else we're doing. Our 3-legged stool model. And I know you should phrase it slightly different, but mental, physical, and spiritual. Yep. You have to have equal legs on those stools. Yeah. So, and it's I can't break down somebody's door and force them to come to my course, to your men's group. It has to be a calling from God, and they have to be willing to do that. But what I am finding is the people that have gone through the course are the best advertisement you can have. Yeah, when they share that within their groups, and our church isn't that big. Between our two services on Sundays, just shy of 500 people, and then there's probably a couple hundred that listen online.
Okay.
So we're not a mega church by any stretch.
Yeah.
But I'm still scratching away at how do I reach more guys to do this, because I haven't had any feedback that said I wasted 6 weeks of my Saturday mornings coming to this course.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't, I always joke, the customer feedback opinion box is wide open, and it's also the garbage can because I don't get paid.
Right.
But yeah, no, I haven't gotten that either. And I'm glad you actually mentioned that too, because if people are thinking about, maybe I'm not where, so let's just zero in on men here. If they're thinking about maybe I'm not, hearing, oh, if I had to run 100 yards and take my family with me, or pull my family out of the house if there's a fire to safety, I just know I'm not up to task. That's the physical. And you brought up the three-legged stool, the mind, body, and soul, mind, body, and spirit. That physical side of you is certainly real. But I think that the mind of being strong, and so we talked right before we hopped on, and I said I kind of had a 2-day analytics marathon at work, and pretty high stress. And so that started on Wednesday morning, and I knew it was going to be stressful. It's going to be a stressful 2 days, but I stepped back and I said, I can control my response. And I learned that I can control my response by doing things physically. I went through things hard physically, and that kind of provided that, I think, the neural pathways. If you want to get scientific, we won't get scientific because
I know you're a data geek, so lay it on me.
Is data, not anything medical. I think that you show it's just your operating unit. Your mind, body, and soul. And when you do something difficult and you have success and you build in one of those areas, it shows the pathways of how to build in others. And so, I'm going to be going through 2 days of stress. So I said, I can be. So here's what husbands need to hear, fathers need to hear, is why physical? Well, it's kind of the first, just to get moving, like move. They say move your ass is a saying that my buddy Josh always tells me, and so I'll use it. But if you get moving, it's just kind of the easiest one to do. But you also get your mind going. You kind of show a pathway for your soul to move forward too. And so in that scenario, if you're a young dad and you have that 2 days of stress coming up, how do you want to respond to that, for your wife, for your kids? How do you want to show up in that circumstance? And I've learned that pathway, or those connections of that three-legged stool, through doing difficult things physically. And so, program like yours, Russ, I'm wondering, like, what feedback have you gotten from men that maybe said, well, I showed up and I thought it was a physical challenge. What has been the feedback with the battle plan? How have you seen men kind of respond to that? Maybe that they showed up thinking it was physical, but got more out of it.
Oh man, that is a great question, and I'm going to have to try to articulate this a little bit. But what I think it is, because we're not doing anything for it, even to the edge of super difficult. But I always tell them, I'll meet you where you're at. And we do, at the end of the session, we'll do, like I said, body weight exercises, because I knew I didn't want to, have it be boot camp. But it's, how many push-ups can you do in a minute? Take a minute break. How many sit-ups in a minute? Take a minute break. Then we do squats. Then we do planks. Then we do a wall sit. So those are the 5 exercises. And what I think happens, though, is it's an eye-opener. And we all, I think, as men in general, we overestimate our abilities in just about everything we do. And I think those moments of just doing that virtually 10 minutes of exercises really triggers them either positively or negatively. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. Like I said,
And I think
it's
the one that on the positive side, say, you know what, I need to do something about this. And then on the negative side, they're like, oh, and then the excuses come out. Well, I have a bad knee, I have a bad shoulder, I have a bad elbow. I'm overweight, but I'm okay. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm comfortable in my body. And so there's no growth there. And growth comes from discomfort, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. I like something you said there, and it kind of segues good. If you kind of follow the course of us getting to know each other now here for, about a year and a half, that men tend to overstate what they're capable of. Well, so I got to know of you in October 2023 when you did our friend Greg's podcast and listened to ever. And I encourage everyone to go back and check out that episode with Russ for more backstory. But we're going to be talking more like now going forward today. And then in March of 2024, we meet virtually as we joined a group called Forge Ferocity, also through our friend Greg Anderson. And he said men tend to overstate their capabilities, something roughly along those lines. And I think when you get people together, so men came into the Battleplan, we came into Forge Ferocity. Many of us had done Jiu-Jitsu or running or stretched ourselves physically. We ran into a group of people, I believe, that were really into self-assessment, improving themselves. They had tested themselves physically. Many of them were, myself included, we were going through some things, and we needed other individuals that were kind of on the same path where we could help each other and guide each other. And I think that it really worked because we came together and none of us overstated what we were capable of. We kind of came to it with truth and transparency, wanting to get better and help each other. I'm curious to hear how you see that, because that was going on. That's almost a year ago now, March 2024.
Yeah, and in that Forge group, you have some absolute beast, top tier athletes in there, and then there's everybody else on the physical level. But then you have folks that are higher on the emotional intelligence level, but everybody is balanced out where they're at. And I think the biggest thing is everybody's lifting a hand to boost the Forge crew. No matter what the issue is, whether it's something physical, something mental, something spiritual, there's always somebody to turn to. And ironically, I just had a session with a counselor right before this meeting, and we agreed to put counseling on hold. And I can go into that if you like, but I was telling him about the Forge group. He's knowing about it. And I said, hey, I don't want to offend you. You are a professional, but I get more out of the Forge group than I do meeting with you one-on-one.
Yep.
And I think part of that is and you had said it earlier when we first started, you said the word vulnerability. And that's really the key that I'm seeing in the Forge group is, and again, men, we overestimate our abilities and underestimate our emotions sometimes. And so being able to be vulnerable and open about what you're lacking is the absolute key. That's solid gold for improvement. And I think that's what we see is the vulnerability piece of the folks on that Forge team opening up and being able to go, hey, I'm dealing with,
No, we and to unpack that a little bit for listeners, because we're inside the club, but Forge Ferocity, I'm not going to try to describe what it is. Maybe like mental.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, no one knows. Mental toughness, discipline. But what we do is we get together for a Monday and Friday Zoom call, and it's about at any given time, it's about a good core of 30 people cycling in and out. some stalwarts, some people right in the midst of some seasons of life that cycle in and out. But what we'll get together and talk about is just finding our value, finding our worth, what we're looking forward to as we kind of turn this calendar. We talked about 2025 and what not only we hope to make it, but how were we going to make it into what we envisioned, and then having a grander vision, things like that. And it is absolutely an environment of vulnerability. I would say it's an environment of truth. Being part of the group, if you kind of look at this podcast, a couple of things that came out of Forge Ferocity is a bunch of individuals that said, Dave, you should do the podcast thing, and encouraged me. And not only encouraged me, but here's the individuals we're talking about. They're like, buy this equipment, buy these headsets, buy these mics, this is how you hook it up. Here's how you do the show. Here's how you record, walking me through nothing expected in return other than each of them, and including myself, and I know including you, is that we really try to, in our exchanges, bring value and then truth. And so that's why exploring truth and capability, I got the capability from endurance when I read the Ernest Shackleton Adventure. And that was just the word, like, I got to go back and find out if it's even in the book, but it's just screamed to God's like, you are so much more capable than where you're at right now, Dave, and you need to explore that. And then from the Forge group, we just made such fast friends that I'm like, this is an environment of truth. I need to know more about truth. If this is what truth can foster in rapid succession, then I need to know more about truth. And so that the Forge group is why this is exploring truth and capability. So little nugget there, little origin story of the podcast. But and I'll just finish up with one thing, and then I want to jump into Forge a little bit. I actually just got puppies too. I got a black lab, Echo, and a red lab, and I named him Forge. That's it. The group has imprinted on my heart, and I just kind of want to pay homage to that experience that each of you have provided. So I know we'll have some Forge crew listening. I love you guys. We have guys mostly. I'm not gonna lie. We have one great sister, Rachel. Love you, Rachel.
Shout out. Yep.
Shout out, Rachel. So that's March of 2024, Russ. And then I'll just fast forward a little bit to Guns and Geese, August this past summer, 2024. And I'm as we do on Fridays on our Zooms, we kind of hand off the mic. I'm just going to hand it to you. We go out to Washington, August 2024, something called Guns and Geese. We show up Thursday night. We're going to be out there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, training pistol and rolling jiu-jitsu. And take it away.
As far as a description of
it's your mic now. I'm putting you on.
I have described it recently as 3 days of top tier shooting and jiu-jitsu instruction disguised as therapy. And if anybody's listening and they're on the don't know about it, investigate it, or if you do and are aware, highly recommend it. With Greg Anderson, Greg Lappin, Joel Assis as the 3 core instructors, and then we have Christopher and Tobin, Will, and having gone twice, going back a second time was phenomenal because you feel like it's a family reunion going back there. And what we did this time in August of 2024 is the Forge crew, I think there was 6 of us or 7. We did Airbnb. And so for 3.5 days, we lived together, trained together, ate together, broke bread. And it's hard to describe that feeling. Like you said, the vulnerability. The first night we're like, okay, tomorrow starts class. We need to go to bed early. And I think it was like 1 a.m. because we were up talking. We had some really intense, couple of the guys shared stuff that was extremely serious.
Yeah.
And we stayed up talking that whole time. And then Saturday night of that course, there's always a bonfire. The range is on Greg Anderson's property, and there's a beautiful river there. There's a bonfire and a dinner, and that bonfire is really what solidifies the group, where people go around and share,
Yeah.
and open up. And I saw it both years. Folks that came to the class were kind of standing on the side, kind of quiet. But when you do that bonfire, there's some of it being outside, running water and burning wood, that just brings out people. They want to talk and they want to share and they want to be, to your words, they want to be vulnerable. And there's a lot of trust that goes on there. What's set at the fire doesn't leave the fire. But there's a lot of growth, not just in your shooting and jiu-jitsu skills, but I think in your relationship skills, your mental acuity, all of it.
Yeah. No, I love it. I wanted to hear you say it because it just coincides with so much. A couple of things that you said there. It's kind of starting from a 30,000 foot view. It is it's 3.5 days disguised as it's therapy disguised as pistol shooting and jiu-jitsu. And I think that one thing we've been coming to a deeper appreciation of lately, I believe that was kind of the jumping off point, is that if you need in your life a chance to kind of step away from the day-to-day, maybe what's overwhelming you, or maybe it's getting you down, or you don't know how to deal and you need to get away. So it's Guns and Geese. They have an Instagram account. I believe they have a Washington date for the middle of the summer. And if either of those, if you've never done jiu-jitsu, that's fine. Like I did a handful kind of in the midst of COVID, injured a rib and used that as an excuse not to go back at the time. But I was really interested in pistol shooting. It is top-notch instruction. It is a steal for what you're getting if you just keep it at pistol shooting and jiu-jitsu. But if you want to go to somewhere that's restorative, I think that the range and the gym are both kind of just places that have a really restorative energy to them with real, sincere, amazing individuals. Check out Guns and Geese. And so maybe I'll even throw that in the show notes because I haven't done that yet. But last year we didn't want to do it because we wanted to make sure that everybody we liked and knew that spot didn't sell out, and we got in for that experience in August. And man, one thing that you also said was that we were in this Forge Ferocity group, so everybody's heard a little bit about what that's about, but that was virtual. And I think that when we came together in August, it was a little bit on my mind. I mean, I felt like I got a deep appreciation for everybody via Zoom, over the kind of the virtual sphere. But when we came together, there's always the danger that maybe when you meet people in person, they don't quite live up, or they don't quite match up with what you envisioned of them. And I kind of want to get your thoughts too, but to a person, everyone not only kind of matched up to kind of how I envisioned them or what I thought of them, but actually far exceeded. It is a group of men and women that are just, it's such an encouragement for just mankind in general. When you run into a group of, 3-4 dozen people that are just that top notch and just that high of a caliber and amazing human beings and so unique each, it's encouragement. But how did you kind of feel about that coming in?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's almost, I want to use the term bizarre, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That you can take virtual strangers that have only seen each other on these computer screens, and they're only this big, and you can't really read their body language, and you don't know if they're just saying what they think that we want to hear, but authenticity was there with every person. And again, it was, not to sound cheesy, but it was instant family. You got 6 grown men sharing a house, and it's like a bunch of cousins and brothers hanging out, like we had been for our entire life. So I can't pinpoint what caused that. I think it was just the perfect storm or the right time for all of us to come together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, one theory that I'm kind of working on, because I'm always thinking, it just doesn't turn off. Doesn't mean I'm thinking right, but I think during kind of the COVID years, what that did was it kind of interrupted everybody's daily lives, right? It certainly did. That's undisputable. That to some extent, everybody's daily lives were interrupted. But it got a lot of men and women who valued kind of self-assessment and getting better, and had something kind of mind, body, or soul to them, and were working on the other areas. It got them talking, and it got them, so why did we join Forge Ferocity? Because Greg Anderson, a port police officer for the city of Seattle, gets in a squad car and says, I'm not really down with enforcing this. And at the time, we're like, yeah, we think the same way. And someone willing to take that step was kind of like the, got that vortex going, and it kind of got us moving in the same direction. And it made the world smaller for people who really valued, self-autonomy, getting better, leveling up, kind of having a physical nature to their lives. And it got us all acquainted. And I think what Forge is a representation of that, because I've mentioned to Greg before. So he films that video. He's a cop with an opinion, and gets fired for it. I said, if you would have just stayed that person who had an opinion about COVID, I mean, none of us are in Forge, and none of us are really interested in what you got going on. But you kept leveling up. You took that experience, you rolled with it. You continually sought new endeavors. So his podcast, Endless Endeavors, is kind of a reflection of what life is. It's endless new endeavors, and you move forward. And I think that a lot of us that were kind of in that vortex and getting to know each other and hear each other's voices, we're just kind of waiting for an outlet to talk about it. And I think that's what maybe Forge provided for us. Again, it's the theory of why it works. And we've mentioned vulnerability in kind of time and place. I'm sure we can keep thinking about why it works, but I don't worry about it too much anymore.
Right. Well, yeah, just know that it does. And I don't think it's a one-off. I'm thinking back to the last month, we've had a couple of new members show up, and immediately, again, they trust us and they become vulnerable, and they're part of the team, and with no awkwardness there at all.
Yeah. It's very valuable. And so, I mean, we're talking, so October 2023, I don't know who you are. And as we sit here in February 2025, I mean, I love you like a brother. And I again, so happy to have you on the show today. I wanted to kind of, maybe I'm throwing a lot of things at you, putting you on the spot, but I like it.
Keep going.
Yeah, this is how I would expect it. If Russ had a podcast, I'd expect you to put me on the spot. I want to do a little exercise, because kind of on that note of the friendship that we have, we've talked about, I wish I lived closer. I wish that like weekly coffees and Bible study were a thing for Dave and Russ, in person. I would love that. But we can't have that. So what we can do is we can be on a podcast. And I thought I'd bring you one of my men's coffee questions from this last week, because I'd love to get your opinion as you were introduced, husband, father, warrior, man of God. So I'm putting you on the spot. So I'll kick it off, and I'm just going to kind of read out this question. So we talked about God's timing versus our desires, and this transitions into what we'll speak about shortly here, and what we spoke about many times. So in John 18:36, Jesus says, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders." So he's about to be crucified, and he knows what's coming. His kingdom is not an earthly kingdom, but my kingdom is not of this world. So with that in mind, the question is, how do we stay strong and faithful when God's timing and ways don't align with our expectations?
Yeah, that's an uncomfortable pause for a podcast. I realize that. Sorry.
is our podcast. So,
and for me, I think it's faith. That's what it boils down for me. And I'm sure that you may have listeners that don't know Christ. And I hope they explore that. And those that do, I think it's the faith that we carry. When we did that values exercise several months ago, that's what I landed on. One of them was faith, because it covers so many things.
right.
And yours is truth is one of yours. I know that. You can almost flip those because it covers so many areas at the same time. But I think waiting on God's timing is a testament and a test of faith.
I agree. And I agree that those two are interchangeable too.
Did I get it right?
It's an any answer. You could have had a really crappy answer and not come up with one, but I knew you'd have one. And I think that faith is important. And I would say, so the question again is, how do we stay strong and faithful when God's timing and ways don't align with our expectations? And I would say, that is, how do we kind of stay, even if you want to take the Christian aspect out of it and God out of it, when things don't work out, how do you kind of stay resolute and steadfast in what you're working towards? Because if you aspire towards the bigger things you aspire towards, the more likely you're going to fall short, or the timing is not going to align with your preferred timing. And I think mine for that is experience. I think that as a 20-some-year-old, 30-year-old, that was a huge challenge. I wanted something, I'd pursue something. I can think of a very distinct job that I actually chased, maybe inflated my qualifications, got into, and it was a nightmare. And it wasn't in God's will for me. It's very clear now. It wasn't in His will for me to have that job, but I forced the timing, I forced the decision. And what I learned about that, coming out of it, and especially over the last handful of years, is that God has things bigger for us. That His vision is all-knowing, and my vision is limited, and my vision is skewed, and my vision is kind of muddied up by the need to make money or status or comparison to those around me. So I think time has taught me.
And I think the word that, as you were speaking, that came to me is resilience as well. Because quitting is easy, enduring is hard. And when I hear the word enduring, I also think of resilience. And to use the one of the Jiu-Jitsu mantras of 1% better every day. And that's how I look at resilience. If I can be 1% better, I'm winning.
Yeah.
Because we do set, again, unrealistic expectations for ourselves and for those around us and for our lives that sometimes don't come to fruition. But if you can pull out the victories in those, and pull out in every failure, there's got to be a win. So, and like you said, that job that you got that was a nightmare, you learned from that.
Yep.
And I guess that was your point of talking about experience. But yeah, I think the art of resilience is being lost. And I think that's, what you're doing, the Stronghold Podcast, a lot of the podcasts from the folks within Forge, of course, Greg Anderson, is helping build that resilience back to where I think it should be.
Yeah. And I think that I said the segued a little bit because God's timing and our expectations. One thing that I admire about you, Russ, is that, and I know, like I said, you can always go back and check out Greg's episode with Russ for a little bit more of the backstory with the Coast Guard. But I think that it's very relatable. Anytime you come out of kind of a identity experience in 31 years in the Coast Guard, rescue swimmer, rescue pilot, definitely forms an identity that you attach to, is that you got out of that and maybe you just kind of want to share a little bit. I am curious. I want to get into jiu-jitsu because that's where all our listeners will want to hear about anyway. So between retiring from the Coast Guard, because I don't know this timeline, and beginning jiu-jitsu, what was the time between the two of those?
It was about 3 years. So I retired in 2015 and started jiu-jitsu in 2018. And we'll tell you the 3 years in between were a complete nightmare, and my wife can back me up on that. And I think it was partially the identity loss of what and who I used to be, and then trying to navigate the civilian work world. And that led me, and well, even before I retired, but I would say the semi-functional alcoholic, 35 pounds overweight, depressed, and I can segue into jiu-jitsu here because it goes hand in hand. It's tied together.
Yeah, please do.
And so at the end of my road, about a mile from my house, I saw a sign that said jiu-jitsu. And at the time, I don't know how many podcasters were talking about it, but I think it was Rogan and Jocko were the two that I had an hour commute each way, 2 hours a day. And so listening and devouring those podcasts, and I kept hearing jiu-jitsu. And, as a kid, Chuck Norris and martial arts was something I always wanted to do.
Right.
But I never brought myself to either be the right time or have the motivation to do it. But I knew something had to change. And I'm like, well, they're talking about this jiu-jitsu thing. Let me give it a shot. And I think I probably said this on Greg's podcast, but I think it's worth repeating. When I signed up and he said, okay, come on down Monday night, 6 o'clock, class starts. Well, I got there at 5:30 because I wanted to be early. But I sat in the car for almost an entire half hour trying to talk myself out of going in because I was terrified. Now I get to use that experience and tell guys that the 2 hardest days of jiu-jitsu is the very first one, and the second day you come back because you know what to expect. But within 6 months of starting that journey, I had lost 35 pounds. I had virtually quit drinking. And you talk about the identity, I found my tribe. Yeah. And when you leave the military, jobs that we did, we had to trust each other. So that trust had to be there. And it didn't mean you had to be best friends with the guy flying next to you or the guys flying behind you in the back or vice versa, but you had to trust them. And so when I entered the civilian business world, I didn't see a whole lot of that going on the trust side.
Right.
And then, so I found the tribe because those that know jiu-jitsu will get it. And those that want to try it need to understand it, that you're learning things that can hurt somebody, can make somebody pass out. And so in training, you have to trust your partner.
Yeah.
That they're going to do the right things. When you tap, they stop. And so all of those combined, just really solidified the new path that the recreated me that moved forward.
Yeah. I think that, that's something to understand. It for you, it was 31 years in the Coast Guard, and attaching identity to that, and then not having kind of a void in place of that. I think, unfortunately, I'm going to relate that back to kind of maybe someone that's in a sales career or a career that gets them, notoriety and income. I think where it's not relatable, and unfortunately, is the translation of, so in the military, and kind of going back to your story a little bit with the Coast Guard, is you had to be proficient enough at something to literally put someone else is going to put their life in your hands, somebody's, on a frequent basis. That kind of proficiency, that kind of responsibility, that kind of weight on someone's shoulders that should translate when you come out of either the military or first responder type careers in a corporate setting. People should respect that, and people should understand how that equates in an everyday setting. I think that's where any comparison I give going forward falls short. But any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I could argue, I could disagree some, because I see the opposite, where people could try to continue, they end their military service, they continue into the civilian workforce, and they carry that label of whatever rank they were, and they have an expectation that they'll be treated the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say there was always respect for what you did, but as you're learning this new way of working, you're just another guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's interesting. You see it from that perspective. I see it from a corporate setting. I actually had a guy come out of the Navy, pretty high rank in the Navy, and I think he commanded over 100 people. And so, I mean, when he came in and we're setting projects in front of him, I'm like, I know you can execute, because you execute it at a high level with hundreds of people, reporting to you and you being accountable to them. But I think that out of that story in the translation, so you retire from the Coast Guard, and then 3 years between that and starting jiu-jitsu, that translates when you have something that you kind of attach your identity to. So maybe I have a really good friend that assembles sales teams. And so he goes into organizations at a consulting basis. And if you need a sales team, he's going to source, build, and be able to get them off the ground. And he's very good at it. And he was very stressed from his career. In fact, he thought he was having a heart attack. It was just the stress and the anxiety of his career. And then he pivoted and he found true value in his life from his next experiences. And so kind of transitioning through where you were at, Russ. So I want to compliment you too, because I wanted to get that time in, because I thought it'd be something awesome. You're always awesome at stuff. But 2018, you began jiu-jitsu. You're a brown belt now, and most people ballpark up to a black belt at 10 years. So you've still got 3 years to get your black belt, and you're right on.
Yeah. And consistency, and let me back up. We don't do attendance at my gym. You don't get promoted because you show up so many days in a row.
Yeah.
But consistency in training, and I can say since 2018, I've trained 3 to 4 days a week since then, unless I'm sick, injured, or on travel. And if I'm not sick, only injured, there's times I'll still go and watch, and learn, through osmosis of what's going on. And I think that's the one of the keys to success is just keep showing up. I know it's cliche, but it's true. And the other thing is there's a difference between a 59 or 58, I'll be 59 in May, 58-year-old brown belt and a 30-year-old brown belt. And so there is a scale there, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But we were just talking last night, a good buddy of mine at the academy, that we're practicing an art, a martial art that you never finish. There is, you may get a belt, you may get a black belt, but you're never going to master everything within that art ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it mirrors life, right?
Right. So you just keep showing up and 1% better, and keep pushing forward. I've enjoyed it. Really, one of my roles at the academy now is when we get the newer folks that come in, particularly the older guys, and I love taking them under my wing and mentoring them on their journey as they get started.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good to see. And so, I mean, you would probably say that that started to kind of reassign value back to you. Like you said, well, I know what I can bring to the table, but I can show up and I can keep practicing this. I can get 1% better every day. Did that kind of start stacking? Because it's important to know, right? Like if you're in a position where maybe you attach identities to anything, insert whatever maybe it was a marriage, and now the marriage is over, and you don't have that anymore, or a job or a career, a first responder, a military. You attached identity. Identity can be also equate to value. Did you start kind of, if you stack those wins and we're saying 1% better every day, start to kind of build that back up in yourself and kind of build up that confidence in yourself? Is that what jiu-jitsu for you provided?
I think it did. Absolutely. That is a true statement. But it also provided me some more resilience. We talked about that a little earlier. That in your daily walk of life, and I know this sounds like a jiu-jitsu, but when you only weigh 160 pounds and you have a 260-pound guy absolutely smashing you, and you don't panic, and you know that you're going to eventually escape, and you're going to move on, then the next day at work, when your boss lays the big project on your desk, or has an issue with something that you turned in, or the program you're working on is not going well, it's real easy at that point then to take a deep breath and go, nobody's trying to kill me here. We'll get through this. We will methodically figure out the way to fix, correct, and move forward.
Yeah, no, it's moving, right? I know one thing that we've learned from our good friend Joshua, his wife Shauna, deals really in the grief space. And Shauna said something. She said that grief is a passage, meaning that you have to keep moving. It's not a destination. It's not somewhere that the Lord intends you to stay, to remain and be confined to. You have to keep moving. And so I would say the same with value, right? If you are in a situation where you lost something you attach identity to and value to, and you don't have that, the worst thing you could do is stay sedentary and kind of dwell in that and take up residence in that. So you didn't, and so now, roughly 8 years or 7 years down the road, you progressed. You're seeing benefit from jiu-jitsu, and I want to get into this. And I asked you before the show too, but there's maybe something in the works in the future, because you're getting so much out of jiu-jitsu. You said you would like to mentor those new to the gym through men's ministry. You like working with men, getting them moving, getting them physical and spiritual. And it's never just the physical. It's always the three-legged stool. Yes. Why don't you jump into what you got going on right now? Because I know, spoiler alert.
Right. Well, so I am working on, really, it's going to be a mobile jiu-jitsu training. And so taking everything that we just talked about, and thank you for the compliment, but supporting men, I want to see people grow personally and in their health and their spiritual walk. And there's a lot of folks, i.e. talked about my group at church, guys that just don't want to commit to doing it for a lot of reasons. And a lot of it's not financial. It's time away from family. So committing to a jiu-jitsu academy is something you should do, but a lot of guys aren't willing to do that. So the idea is I will come to your house, I will bring my mats, and we will start beginner jiu-jitsu on your schedule. But with that, you're going to get that three-legged stool, because it's hard to teach jiu-jitsu and practice it and roll with somebody without adding the other elements of the stool, the other two legs. So that's the core idea right now. I'm hoping sometime around April, we'll actually kick the website off live, and it'll be here in the Vancouver, Washington metro area, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. No, awesome. If there's one man to move that mission forward, it's you. And I'll say that because I came out to the Guns and Geese experience. Again, very little jiu-jitsu experience. We rolled together the first day. And yeah, no, man, I don't feel like you gave me anything, but you gave me the ability to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess, is the best compliment I can give you. Like I felt it was the perfect kind of introduction into the weekend. And I think a lot of us will hear or a lot of people will hear this podcast and think, is this an ad for jiu-jitsu? And I would say, well, it can be. Yeah, I will also say this. Like I may be out of the true believers that we have in the Forge Ferocity team. I mean, I got a lot going on. And one thing that I found a very similar feeling to is through running. When I started running in 2018, I did not like it. And it eerily similar to like how I felt with jiu-jitsu probably a couple of months ago. And but I felt like it was important. It was important for some reason. I couldn't identify it, but I knew for a long time that I had been all words and no action in my life. And running was certainly action. Like it was getting this big 200+ pound frame moving, in a direction for a long period of time. It wasn't easy. I didn't like it. I thought people looked funny when they ran. And so maybe you're hearing about jiu-jitsu and you're thinking the same thing. Like, I'm old. I haven't been moving for a while. People look goofy when they do it because they kind of do in jiu-jitsu. But that's not the point. Find something, if you're listening to this, find something where you can be moving. If you're in something that isn't a passage right now and you're not happy with it, so you arrived at a destination, or you've arrived at a momentary destination, let's put it that way, where you find yourself, you're not moving, your mind isn't being worked. Maybe you're working a job that's just, you laugh about Friday and it's only Tuesday. Maybe you're kind of riding the couch. Maybe you're a big NFL fan like I was, and that takes a big portion of your life. Get moving and find something. It certainly doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu, because I also laugh. I'm like, I asked my wife, like, am I crazy? Because I basically joined a wrestling team at 48. And so,
well, I was, no matter what, pick something. And like you said, you're one of your buddies always says, just move. And it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. That just happens to be what I do and what you're starting to learn to enjoy. And I think for a lot of people, it's been extremely helpful. But it could be running. It could be going to the gym. It could be, I play pickleball. I don't care, but do something.
Yeah.
And make the time for it. One of the things we talk about is, if you don't make the time for your health now, you'll be forced to make the time for your illness later. And I think that's important. So, and it comes down to priorities, right? I am blessed that my wife is 100% supportive, to the point where if there's days that I go, oh, maybe I just won't go to class tonight, she's like, no, you're going to class. Because she saw a change in me as well.
Yeah.
Not just the physical change, but the mental and emotional change in me. So she does our cardio kickboxing classes in the morning. So we're both at the same gym, just at different times. But that spousal support was huge, for my success moving forward.
Yeah. No, I think that we probably both have similar pictures. I've seen your before picture, before the handsome, striking man that is in front of us today. Mine's called Doughy Dave. I just think, when we talk about getting moving, whatever it is, like just try something. Like you said, if it's pickleball, it's pickleball. I don't think that I set out to do something that I didn't like. At first I think I just biked, because I always biked, or I walked, because walking, I could walk with my wife, and you'd be surprised. Like we talked about, 1% better every day. Those things can get you 1% better every day. And then I think once you build a little bit of confidence, so you talked about like the Battleplan, work with men from your church. At our church, we have a mission that we serve every summer for a 100-mile bike ride. And some of those guys show up. And I tell you what, the first training ride of 12 miles, it's a challenge for them. Like that's the longest they've ever biked. And by about 2.5 months later, they have to bike 100 miles. It has to start somewhere, so get moving. And then I think what's fun, I actually had I don't know if this is going to take off. I don't think I stole it from anybody, but where I'm at right now, I've said that I've come to believe that conquering oneself looks like shaping what we want to do least into our passions. And I am really happy that my life is there right now. And that started with something.
Right.
So maybe you want to speak to that too, because it was when you're, when you're dealing with alcohol addiction, or at least being very, very satisfied with drinking a lot. And I know, it's a fine line, however you want to refer to it. But you're 30 pounds overweight, and you were a stud. You were a rescue swimmer. You are, number 68. And that's a big freaking deal. And I'll clean it up a little bit, but for everyone listening to this, in case you're wondering who you're listening to, Russ is a freaking warrior in the truest sense, because it crosses every spectrum of his life. But maybe you want to talk about that. Like, what got you going, and how was it initially? I mean, was it all a dream? So you're 30 pounds overweight, you're drinking a lot. What's it like when you try to start moving?
Well, a lot of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That when you start going to class, and I didn't know what I was doing. Obviously, I'm just learning, but the violence piece of it actually is intriguing to me, because it is a violent sport. There's no way around that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. So that was intriguing, but then all of a sudden, whatever day I'm going to go train, say it's tomorrow, Friday, and it's Thursday night, and typically we sit at home and have several drinks, or we go out to our local pub down the street, have several drinks. Then all of a sudden we just stopped, because it's like, wait a minute, I want to be as physically and mentally prepared for tomorrow as I can be. And so that just kind of rolled through. And I think the other thing was the age piece. And it's almost embarrassing that even I started at 52. At 54, I was in better shape than I was at 34, because that I was into my pilot career then. So I was a swimmer trapped in a pilot's body.
Okay.
And that was the other thing I hear all the time for an excuse is, I'm too old. You're not too old. And guess what? There's a ways around. You may not be as flexible. You may not have the mobility. You may not have the strength. But the job will teach you how. And there's ways to work around that. People with disabilities doing jiu-jitsu. You just have to have the desire. And you have heard that jiu-jitsu is for everybody. I always say it's for everybody that wants to be there. And I count, there's more people that have come and gone in our academy than have come and stayed. And that's okay, because you have to try it. Maybe it's not for you, but if you enjoy it and you keep showing up, you're going to progress. It's just the way it works.
Yeah. Keep showing.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
I don't remember what the question was, Russ. So
the difference between when I started to, as I started on the journey.
Yeah.
And early on, there was a lot of injuries. Partially because you don't know what you're doing, and partially your body has to build up the endurance. To the smashing, the different positions that you get put into.
Yep.
And so over time you adapt to that.
Yeah. But, not only that, like how exciting is that? I talked to our buddy Greg a little bit on the podcast, about running. People ask me now, because I kind of have become one of the running friends of people like looking to get into it. And they go, hey, I'm looking to get into running. Any advice you give me, Dave? And I'm like, don't run. Because before I started, even through probably 10 years of competitive football, I had bulletproof knees. I had perfect knees. I run for, a handful of years and my knees are just like question mark all the time now.
Right.
But it's a life well lived. Like it's part of the experience. Like me putting together. So we're in Minnesota here. I'm in Minnesota. And we're, winters are pretty tame. I can still run through the winter, but I'm looking at getting going here again, starting to get the miles going, and my knees are question marks. And so I have to really think about what does the equation look like to rehab, to do the plyometrics, to do the stretching, to be committed to a program that allows me to get back on the road and do miles. And I don't know how that sounds to people, but for me, I'm really freaking excited because I get the opportunity to do that. And in the Dave that I was in 2018, that was a dad that was all words and no action, would have never thought that way. And I'm curious, I want to ask you this question because I'm hearing this a lot, especially from the circles that we run in, Russ, is people saying things like, I'm not even the same human being I was 5 years ago. How many times have you said that lately? Because it's certainly at least once or twice, 3 times in the conversation, the backstory that we've shared today.
Yeah, I say it often. And my wife and I talk about it often. Because she found her help as well. And the motivations there are, yes, there's some intrinsic motivation that, we all have an ego, and it feels good to be getting older and still be in shape. Period. It does. However, I have 6 kids and 7 grandchildren, and to be a motivator for them. And in our house, we always say, we don't want to keep up with our grandkids. We want them to keep up with us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our house motto with the grandkids. And we try to live that. And I think it's good for us, and it's even better for them down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think even like a lot of us, this should be an encouragement for anyone listening to this to get moving, to find a group of human beings that you can be vulnerable with, that you can open up with, that you can talk about like what's going on in your life with, because I think a lot of us, even since March of 2024, that joined the Forge Ferocity group, like I look at a lot of the individuals in that group, and they're not the same human beings. And it's not that they were bad before. It's not like I would say from 2019 to now, I don't even recognize who I was. There are some like inherent things. Like I have a very high priority on being a father, being a husband. I'm, strengthening my marriage. But aside from that, I get together with friends now that I didn't see before 2020, and they're like, who are you? And that's a lot of work. Like we talked about, it's showing up. It's 1% better every day. It's finding endeavors that you're excited. The best way I can put it, and this isn't mine, I'm stealing it. You should be doing things that excite you a lot and scare you a little bit. And you're on the right track. And so for you, that's jiu-jitsu. That's marriage, right?
Yeah, it's entrepreneurship. It's relationships, new relationships. It's all of that. And I just had a thought as you were talking. I'll come back to it if I think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you are the entrepreneurial, so bringing jiu-jitsu to individuals, organizations, mobile jiu-jitsu. I will say this: if anyone's listening to this, so I think you said April, kind of getting things rolling, and you're progressing. I got to compliment you as well. You're progressing fast. Like you got your LLC.
Yep. You got the logo, and we're working on website. And I'm working in the background on curriculum.
Yeah. And so here's the compliment, or here's the sales pitch. If you are thinking about the jiu-jitsu journey and maybe you're intimidated, maybe Dave saying in this podcast, what were you thinking joining a wrestling team when you were 48? I'll say this. I freaking love it. Is it a challenge for me to go? It is. It's that new thing that I don't want to do, but I know I need to do, and I know eventually it will become more of a passion. But if you're intimidated, if the idea of rolling with sweaty men nightly, as my wife would love to say, intimidates you a little bit, and you're looking for the environment to try it out, you can't do any better than Russ. Like I think what you've heard from this man on the podcast today is a background of high performance, a background of wanting to better himself, changing course, changing directions, a lot of life experience, but then also seeing that and wanting to help other people better themselves. That's who you're coming to. That's who you're receiving instruction from. Again, really kind of one of my first legit days on the mat. I rolled with Russ and I learned a ton. It was very not intimidating. I felt like at no time was Russ going to break my arm. I will fight an arm bar to my detriment. I found out actually I'd just been recovering because I partially tore a pec because I've been fighting arm bars in freaking practice like a child, not tapping. So, but Russ never took me to that point. And yeah, I mean, just someone that when you would invest your dollars with Russ, not only would be accommodating, has that interest in you, but has been where you're at and has been trying something new and seeking, value and identity in something new, and also is confident enough to know his true identity is through Christ. You couldn't be in better arms. So when, can we name do you want to throw the name out there?
Oh, sure. It's going to be called West Gorge Mobile Jiu-Jitsu. And thank you for the unpaid advertisement. And I'm grateful. You're an awesome brother, and your words are too kind. But again, it's turning into a passion. And you said I'm moving quickly, but is there any other way to move? So it's not going to be a generational wealth business, but it's going to be a business that creates physical improvements and mental improvements and spiritual improvements for anybody that wants to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought about what I was thinking earlier when you talked about, how different we are now. I did attend a rescue swimmer reunion this June of 2024. And had the advantage of having swimmers that I worked with when I was a swimmer, and then swimmers that are still active duty that knew me when I was a pilot. And the compliments that I received were amazing. And I don't do it for the compliments. I want that to be clear. But, I don't even really recognize who you are now. But again, it's not just the physical appearance; it's everything combined. And I am a strong believer that everybody says I want to be the best me, be a better you, because I don't know if you'll ever get to be the best you. Be a better you, and keep moving forward. And we change. We were just talking about it. For 20 years, I had horses. I worked on a ranch. I lived and breathed the horse lifestyle. For 20 years, I wore nothing but snap shirts, boots, and Wranglers. And my wife's like, "Where's the cowboy?" And I'm like, "He's still here. He's still here on the inside. I've just moved on to something different that represents who I am." The Coast Guard pilot, he's still here. He's just moved on. The swimmer, same thing. So we can build on that, and this may be a really bad analogy. I've never tried it before, but I'm going to try it on you for the first time. It's everybody has the favorite junk drawer, right, in their house. And you go to clean out the junk drawer. You don't just dump everything out of it. You keep the things in there that are useful, have a purpose, but then you get rid of the fluff that over the years that has accumulated in that.
Yep.
And then you start over again with the base stuff that's in your junk drawer that you want to keep, and you get rid of everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. There's certainly a ton of crap in my junk drawer. And to work that analogy, I would say if you're listening to us, whether it be Russ, whether it be me, I mean, there's no cost of admission to make yourself 1% better. And to hear you have that reunion experience and to have people say that from the perspective of like, it's a good thing, right? Like I don't even recognize who you are. You've improved, you've leveled up. I don't do it for that, but I tell you what, that freaking feels good. That it feels good because people, it's like I could have been the same, and what a tragedy that would be, right? Like I could have bulletproof knees still, and I could be pulling down that couch watching 12 hours of football between Sunday and Monday, and that could be life. I was just that. I was 20s and 30s, spent pretty mid-20s to through my 30s and early 40s, pretty sedentary. Fantasy football, NFL, craft beer loving. And I know, Russ, there's a lot of crossover too, when you stepped away or where you let yourself go, the man you were to the man you are now. If guys are listening to this, there's nothing special about Russ and I, I would say the most special, I will clarify that. What's special about Russ and I is that we serve an almighty God. And through serving him, he's shown me what he has for me in life, not what he wants from me. And that by doing that, I can reflect his light. And I tell you what, people love that. People love a friend that will reflect God's light in their life, because it helps them shine light on the value that they have. It helps shine light on that junk drawer, to use your analogy, Russ. And it helps shine light on what's good in that drawer, because we all got it. We all got the junk drawer, and I agree with you. I like that analogy.
And let me continue to beat up some of the men in your audience. And again, we talk about this in my battle plan.
Yeah.
And I'll use the church as an example. And now I'll ask you a question. If you lived here and you knew my wife and you did things with us all the time, and you saw me at dinner with another woman, what would your reaction be?
Yeah, no, that's not gonna fly.
You called me out on it, right?
Yeah.
Or if I showed up at church every Sunday smelling like a bottle of Jack Daniels, you and several other men in the church would call me out on it, right?
Yeah.
If I show up 100 pounds overweight, nobody's saying a thing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get over that taboo of not holding each other accountable. Yep. We kind of take the health piece and put it off to the side. And nobody says, hey, what's going on? What's happening in your life that you've gotten here? And really dig into that and allow them to be vulnerable and trusting that you can dig in and help it.
Yeah. I think if I had to answer your question, why that works for you and I, Russ, is because we value truth. We've seen, again, I've only known Russ since March of 2024. I mean, we roughly exchanged maybe a couple messages before that. And our friendships deepened, again, through Forged Ferocity. Those friendships, everybody's like, Dave, who's this group out in Washington that you continually talk about and brag on and just like tell these great stories about? Well, it's a bunch of human beings that really value truth. Like with that group of people, in general in life, it's become more and more part of me. I don't want to bring any BS to that group. I want to bring truth, and I want to bring value, and I want to help unearth value that people inherently have in that group. And that's carried forward. That's spilled out into every course of my life. It's because of those humans. It's I'm not going to name names because if I start with one, I got to go through the entire roster. I feel bad. But that's what it is. I mean, that's why we're comfortable doing it, Russ. And so I think you started to draw out on that a little bit. If you're in church and, you have a men's ministry, you go to a men's coffee, or maybe you're in a young parents group with other men. Well, first of all, get your house in order, 1% better every day, get moving, so that you have some capital when you make that suggestion of, hey, you might want to get moving. 100 pounds overweight is just as bad as drinking every day. Gain some capital. But get comfortable in the uncomfortable, get comfortable being vulnerable. And maybe you offer that up in yourself and you're improving yourself. And maybe a lot of it's just the example that you set. That's what it was for me early on. I needed to be a better example. That got me some capital to kind of get into the difficult conversations. But yeah, I agree with you. It is not the lack of accountability. Here's what I think it is. It's just once you hold somebody to account, you have to be accountable to yourself. And self-acceptance scares the hell out of people.
I agree 100%. And I think what you've started here with Stronghold is gaining traction, and you are providing a service. And you had said truth and value. The word I always associate with value, and maybe we've talked about this before, but is be an asset. Be an asset to your family. Be an asset to your community. Be an asset to everyone around you. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's where the passion comes from. Absolutely. If you want something worthwhile pursuing, what Russ just said, be an asset and think about your areas of life where you're not. And that's okay. This isn't judgment. This isn't Russ and Dave got it all figured out. We identify and shine light on those areas of our life every single day. We shine that light on the areas of each other's lives every single day. And we help each other. We help each other level up. It's like, or if you express, Russ, where you have shortcomings and you want to level up, it's what can I pray for you about? What can I talk to you about? What can I help you with? I might not know what you're doing, but maybe you just want to bounce ideas off me. And it's amazing when you move forward with that 1% better every day, and you want to be an asset. Guess what you find? You find other people moving forward, getting 1% better every day, and wanting to be assets. And you know what you get when you get a bunch of those people around? You get people that are brothers and sisters in very short order, like Russ and I got through Forge Ferocity. It's not, I think it's many dynamics, but that's one of them. Like we all want to get better. We all want to be assets. And then we all want to bring truth to the equation. And we were vulnerable enough to do it.
Amen. I don't think I can top that.
So with this, I always say, Russ, that, this is definitely an on pause. And I wanted to actually throw something and offer it up to you, and no response needed. But I know I got this platform and I got this equipment. So when you get West Gorge Mobile Jiu-Jitsu going and you want to start telling those stories and what you're seeing, and if you want literally an unpaid advertisement, I'm here for you, brother. So
I appreciate it. That's awesome. Yeah. And I will, I'm still working the tagline, but I think I've landed on it in kind of a negative and a positive. I won't make you a world champion, but I will help you be a champion of your world.
I think you nailed it. Anything else? I mean, that's a great way. So maybe you throw that one out there again? And, but anything else before that you wanted to get out or that we didn't cover? Or should we just say, hey, put a pause on this conversation and we'll pick it back up at a later time?
Well, let the people talk. If they want to hear more, we can do part 2.
Yeah. I think that's out there in the future somewhere. So what was that tagline? I like it. Every time you said it.
I won't make you a world champion, but I will help you be a champion of your world.
Yeah. I love it, brother. And I would say it's never perfect. In those bigger endeavors that you chase, you're going to fall short. But Russ, you're a champion of your world. And it's been fun being in that orbit. And I look forward to where the Lord takes our relationship and our friendship and what the future brings. So with that, as always, thank you for joining in and listening to Russ and I on the Stronghold Podcast.